For the parents that are out there, if you haven't played baseball, or if you haven't been in your son's shoes, really kind of take a little bit more steps back, because how your son is dealing with the everyday being a normal young teenage high school player or a youth amateur player, they're going to struggle, right? Not every kid is going to go 4 for 4 every single day. And so I think hopefully the parents have a really good feel of who their son really is. Is he ready for criticism? Is he ready for what you have to say? Because at the end of the day, if you just keep attacking your sons or your players, and it's going to fall on deaf ears because they're not ready to listen. It compiles over time.
Welcome to another episode of the Advocate Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Hannaford, and this is the podcast that is dedicated to helping youth and amateur baseball players and parents navigate the world of travel baseball. Today, I'm thrilled to have a very special guest. His name is Keoni DeRenne. He is the assistant Major League hitting coach for the Kansas City Royals and a respected figure in professional baseball. He is known for his deep knowledge of hitting mechanics and his ability to develop players at the highest level. Keoni was born and raised in Hawaii. His journey to a coach in the big leagues is a testament to his perseverance, hard work, and his passion for the game. Now, growing up on the islands, Keoni faced unique challenges as a young baseball player, navigating the geographical and logistical barriers of pursuing a career in the sport. All right, I am joined today by my good buddy, Keoni DeRenne. Keoni, I know we were talking offline about this, but tell the listeners how long we've actually gotten to know each other. It's been a lot longer and than I would have expected.
Right. I'd say 24, 25 years, from around summer of 2000 or 2001, I believe, is when we kind of came into contact, and here we are in 2025. So it's always been good for me as a starting point to have an even number draft year that I started playing professionally, and then now into my coaching career. So I always have an easy number to kind of go back and reference to. So yeah, definitely either 2000 or 2001 for sure.
No, and I got to tell you, man, like we just saw each other in Hawaii at Isaiah Kiner-Falefa's wedding, and you're like my brother. So cannot thank you enough for coming on here. But I guess to tee this thing off, what is something that, and this could be an event, this could be a point in time, is there something that's kind of happened in your life that if that moment wouldn't have happened, or if that experience wouldn't have happened, you wouldn't be who you are today?
Yeah, man, that's a really good question. That's a loaded question too, for I'm sure a lot of people, and maybe it'd be a lot easier for them to answer maybe a single moment in their lives. I can't think of one thing or one event or one scenario where, like, all right, my life is now pivoting and changing in this direction, because I grew up in the game of baseball from the time I was young. My father coached at the University of Hawaii for many years, and he started there before I was even born. So growing up watching University of Hawaii baseball, playing baseball, there's a lot of aspirations on my end just because of the environment I grew up in, that I wanted to be a baseball player. And from the time I was 2-3 years old, being able to pick up a bat and throw a ball till now, baseball has been a huge part of my life, and I'm forever grateful for it. But honestly, Matt, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for my faith, right? God has had a plan for me from day one. Little did I know that it was going to lead to a coaching career. As little kids, we always wanted to be playing because we watch our idols and people on TV, and that's who we want to be like and who we emulate. But that wasn't a part of my plan. I was able to have success as an amateur, collegiate player, professionally, but that wasn't part of what God wanted me to do, as far as continue on to be a major league player. And little did I know that all the things and events that had happened across my life and the people that have come into my life has set me up for now to where this is where God feels that I fit best. And I'm so grateful that it's within the baseball world and the baseball community. And I can't be more great. Like I said, more grateful for this chance to still be in the game, and hopefully till I decide to just walk away, which, I don't see it slowing down anytime. So that's why I'm here, is because of my faith and where God has led me and planned for me.
I love that. How difficult was it for you? Because you were like any kid growing up, right? You had ambitions and dreams of being a Major League Baseball player. How difficult was it? You got to AAA, right? And you spent a lot of time really close.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're fortunate enough to be a coach in Major League Baseball for the Kansas City Royals, but how difficult was it as a player to get that close and not achieve what you thought was your kind of big audacious goal? And I think now you have perspective and you're able to, acknowledge, you're talking about your faith. Like, I love that. I think a lot of players would benefit from having a belief system like you. I'm sure that was a difficult journey for you and a difficult realization. Am I right in saying that?
Absolutely. And, physically, I don't pass the eye test, right? I'm a small guy, 5'7", 160, 165 pounds. So physically, I don't stand out, and I don't have what you would consider physical tools that a lot of my teammates and players have. And that was never, to me, an issue, other than that would be the one knockoff that I had right away. However, I kind of flipped the mode of, well, if I'm not as physical as a lot of the people who are playing Major League Baseball professionally, what can I do, or what do I do to make myself stand out? And so the skill work, the skill and the time and the dedication that I had to my craft, spending time in the weight room, doing things agility-wise on the field to keep my quickness, maintain quickness, if not trying to get faster. Those are all the things that I needed to do to allow my physical attributes not maybe be a hindrance against me. But, at the end of the day, Matt, and I can look back in my career and I really don't have a lot of regret into what could have been, what could I have done as a minor league journeyman. And I just wasn't good enough. So being at that AAA level, playing there for me was an accomplishment in itself that maybe a lot of people would have never thought that I could achieve. But at the same time, when I did see Major League Baseball up close, as far as like spring training goes, and seeing what those guys did, man, they're on another level. And even now, especially coaching and seeing these guys on an everyday basis, there's a gap between that AAA and Major League level, even still to this day. And so I just don't think I had what it took, and I'm okay with that, because like I said, now my journey as a coach has set me up for where I'm at today, to be able to pass on my experience as a player and all the teammates and coaches that I came across, to be able to give back to the players and the organization that I have right now.
How do you think the game has changed, right? I mentioned that you're, the assistant hitting coach for the Kansas City Royals in the big leagues. You see guys every day. Like, arguably you're coaching one of the best hitters in the game right now, maybe arguably the best player in Bobby Witt. How has the game changed from today to really what it was like when you were playing, right? 15, 20 years ago.
Right. I think there's a lot of depth now. The depth of a lineup, the depth of an organization, and the guys that are, because I think a lot of these players now that we are coaching and being around, they've been playing baseball a lot more than possibly when I was growing up, because of travel ball, because of having year-round opportunities for these guys to improve their skill set. And on top of that, what we know about nutrition, what we know about performance, these guys have so much access to technology, data, outside private sector people who are, a lot of them are very knowledgeable. And so when you're a high school player now, like, some people have probably a team of people guiding these top prospects, these talented players, to eventually one day get drafted and then possibly become major league players. So there is an advantage, more than just I show up to play high school baseball, I train when I train, and when the season's done, I may go and play another sport. So I think that's where the game has changed. And because there's so much more information available that these players have at their fingertips, I can go back and watch an interview from Barry Bonds to Ken Griffey Jr. to the Mike Trouts to Bobby Witt Jr., to the present day. And so all this information that guys are being able to look at and find on the internet and through social media, I think is just helping them with just their development as athletes. And they don't, I think, even realize it. Whereas back in my day, it's more just having the conversations with guys that you're around, which is still valuable and still holds true, I believe, right now. But I just think the wave of information has really taken a hold of these players. And with that, they can definitely probably target their craft and their skill set even more so, instead of just, well, let me just try to train what I think a baseball player should do.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. You said something that I do think resonates, which is, a lot of these kids, like, I think about it from this standpoint. Do you know who Derek Sivers is?
I do not.
No. So this is a guy who he started a company, CD Baby. He ended up writing a book. But one of the things that he always talks about is if information was all that mattered, I guess if information was all that mattered, everybody would be a billionaire and everybody would have like 6-pack abs, right? But what's funny about that is in what you're describing, I think it absolutely is true. Because if you just go back and you look at, let's just say 15 years ago, right? 15 years ago, so many of these kids weren't, I guess 20 years ago, so many of these kids weren't playing travel baseball to the degree that they are today. 15 years ago was probably kind of the start of it, right? But so many of these kids they would play multiple sports, which I do think is kind of coming back to the norm right now. But yeah, I just think everybody is so much more open-minded to all of this level of information that they before never had access to.
And
right?
that's, like you said, perfect words, access, right? And if you don't have a lot of means of people are in your circle that can give you advice, that can give you help, where do you go? And so, but because there's information literally at our fingertips, I can Google search, I can YouTube, I can social media and find something, whether it's the right information, that's for you to decide as a person, but it's like, how do I filter it so that I know that what this person is saying and what that person is saying really resonates with me? So you still got to trim down the fat, but the information is out there. And I think that's where the game has changed, and, it's amazing, what is out there. And I think there's a lot of really good content, but also I think there's some content that maybe people may take out of context too. So where a player and his family or a player and people in his circle really need to just hunker down and be like, okay, well, what's going to be best for you? What is the best information that's going to help you succeed and achieve your goals as a professional, if not major league player?
Yeah, Keoni, and I hope you realize this. I believe that you do. I think everybody needs to hear this, though. I think what happens sometimes in pro ball is a lot of these players, they look to coaches, and let's just say a coach in the big leagues, coach who played in the big leagues. Oh, this guy played in the big leagues. He was a great hitter. Therefore, he would make a good hitting coach. Like that's, I think, the assumption sometimes. And I actually believe the opposite, which is what value, Keoni, do you have to provide to these players? Because you didn't have it easy, as you described, right? You had to overcome so many more things. And so I think what you realized about yourself is, all right, look, at this next level, right? Sometimes the best kids in the area in high school, they get to the next level and they know that everybody's going to be really good, but they don't know to the degree to which these guys are going to excel. And then when they see it firsthand, it's oftentimes overwhelming and they don't even know what to do with it. So having a coach like you who, man, you had to grind through it, right? You had to kick and scrape through it. And so to have somebody like you that they can lean on to kind of give them these words of encouragement and this guidance, I think that is extremely valuable. Do you have those conversations with players? Like, do players lean on you when they do kind of face those challenges and maybe overcoming their mindset or things like that?
I think they do. And honestly, Matt, like whether it's at the major league level or not, as a player, right? I've never stepped in the box in a major league stadium, so I can't put myself in those players' shoes to say, hey, I know exactly what you're going through. I've been there, I've done that. So that's one thing that has never been easy for me to come across. However, the relationships that you build with these players from the get-go solidifies anything possibly moving forward that you can give to them advice-wise to comfort them, and being a part of their journey, because the feedback that I get from them is what they are experiencing as a major league player now, right? And so for the past 3 seasons, watching it, observing it up close, when I've talked with players, veterans and young core players from the get-go, I'm building that new library of information of what these major league players are actually going through. However, at the end of the day, they're still human beings, right? They lose confidence. They're not going to always be successful. So adversity kicks in. And I think luckily for me, the experience that I had as a player and obviously as a minor league coach, the experiences that I've been a part of can now still resonate to the major league everyday player as far as just how do we get through certain times, because they have all had so much success along the way. However, okay, now they're struggling at the major league level. All right, what's the outside noise that is probably, maybe, is it adding to your stress? Is it adding to you not being able to perform with a clear mind, clear head day in and day out? Or is it just strictly results based, results oriented, right? And we are, as baseball players, we want results, right? You could do everything right and still get out. You could do everything wrong and get credited for a hit, right? On the offensive side. So just really finding that balance. But when you build the relationships with these players, you have that trust factor. And so when you can pull a guy aside or just talk to him with other people in a room, they can let their guard down. It's like, hey, they are major league players when they put that uniform on, but they're still human beings and they're still people who want advice just about life and how to deal with struggles. So I think resonating with them and the other staff members that we have and their own personal experiences, I think helps the player being able to move forward when difficult times arise.
Keoni, do you think that you've actually learned from players too?
Absolutely. Especially at this level and the eliteness of these players, it's amazing what these guys can do. And for them to do it day in, day out, year in and year out. And, Salvador Perez, I mean, it's amazing what Salvi has done for a long time. And I think he's still trending in the right direction. But what they bring to the table, everybody operates differently, right? Everyone comes into that cage right before, to get their work done. And when they walk in, different attitudes, different mindset, different personalities. But we know as a staff and we know as a group of coaches how to basically tailor to each guy. And we want to create a fun environment when they come in because we know how hard the game is. We know how stressful it can become. But when they walk into that cage and we're working with them, how much can we get them to just relax and be themselves? Because when they're themselves, they can perform and be at their best. But every player that comes through those doors, they're all coming from different walks of life, different countries. You just never know. A guy might have a bad day with his wife or his kid, and they come in and they got to perform, right? They're entertainers at the end of the day when they step on that major league field. So finding that balance, I think, is huge. But again, it all goes back and stems to having the relationships with these guys. So we have, I think because of our age, and I'm not trying to date myself and being an old man by any means, but I think we're good people readers, right? We understand who these kids are and we've been around them for so much that we know, hey, this guy might be struggling today or this guy's having a bad day. Just the moment they walk in and you read their body language, and we just kind of go off of that. So,
well, and there's so much pressure on these kids' shoulders, right? Because you have layers of like different types of players in the big leagues, right? You have the kid who's like the up and down kid, just getting called up, or maybe he's getting shuttled back and forth between AAA and the big leagues. There's pressure on that kid because it's like, hey, I don't want to go back down to the minor leagues. I want to establish myself. Here's my opportunity to make some money if that's important to them. Like these are the things that players think about on a daily basis. Then you have like the next level of guy, which is, hey, I've been in the big leagues for 5 or so years. Maybe I've gone through arbitration. I'm about to be a free agent. I need to solidify myself so I can actually go get that payday and take care of my family. And like, this is the next layer of guy. And then there's the top guy, which is like, yeah, that superstar. He's already established. He's already got his money. He's not going down to AAA. He's there. He wants to spend, just a certain amount of more time in the big leagues.
Right.
So you have all these different personalities with each level. And here you are having to like navigate all these different bodies with different personalities and different levels.
Absolutely.
And you need to figure out how you can bring the most out of them.
Absolutely.
Whether they're 10 for 10, 0 for 10, right? Like that's kind of your job. So absolutely. One of the things that you talked about is how do I help make these guys most comfortable? What have you found works?
Yeah. Ooh. Music. That to me is a starting point. I say that because when these when these players come into the cage and in our work environment, there's music going, right? And the impact that music has, whether you know the song, not know the song, it sets the vibe, it sets the tone. And when you have the right music, and a lot of times I think we've got a pretty good playlist, and it's a variety of music in different genres. Guys walk in, and it's almost like that they can forget about what just took place before they walked in. I know it sounds kind of far-fetched, but honestly, when they start walking down the stairs, they can kind of hear the music that we've got vibing in the cage. And once they come in, man, you kind of see different personalities. You kind of see different body languages, emotions come out. And that, to me, I think is a starting point. Now, of course, not everyone's going to be lively and singing along with the song, but it just creates this environment of like, hey, this is for us. This is for you guys. This is for all of us combined. And with the good vibes going in the background, nobody wants to walk into a funeral home, right? Nobody wants to walk in where it's quiet, it's serious, the air is out of the room. When 2 years ago when we struggled badly, it was tough for us to show up every day, like trying to be excited, trying to be positive when we just don't know what was going to take place. And when players would walk in, and if we didn't have the music on, they'd be the first ones like, hey, why don't we have any music? What's going on here? And so that to me resonated like, hey, we set the tone, we set the vibe with whatever music we got going on. And if they want to change it when they come in, we change it. But I really feel that music is the starting point. But also to your point, when guys do walk through that door, they come in hot, they come in soft, they come in neutral. There's some guys that come in every single day the same way, and they're never too high, never too low. Salvi comes in, and he is high every day. He's talking, he's loud, he's himself. Like you would not know if that guy went over his last 5 games, right? Bobby comes in, he's smiling, he's still a 24-year-old kid, and he's ready to rock, and then everybody else kind of falls in between based on where they're at. But overall, I think we've got a good nucleus of guys that when they come in, they're ready to work. They know what they need to do. It's part of their process, part of their routine. And I think music just totally adds another layer or another level for them to just, hey, this is how we can become ourselves, and we play music right before they hit, right before they go in the game. And I think and you look at when guys have their walk-up song, something about that walk-up song resonates with that player for whatever reason. And if that locks him into, I'm ready for this at bat, then so be it. And everyone goes with the different flow of whatever song that they choose.
Keoni, when a player's struggling, going through a slump, right? Maybe you don't say those words. I think there's a delicate balance, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've never been a hitting coach, but there's a delicate balance between, all right, I want to give them information, but I want them to be hungry for the information, because we all know players, right? If you're in this business, you know players who they would describe kind of the best hitting coaches as the guys that would read off of them. Like, is this guy ready for this info, or is it too soon? Because the counterpoint to that, right, is the hitting coach who every day is saying, do this, and it's just too much information. It's overwhelming. Players don't respond well to that. So you got a guy who's struggling. How do you handle when is the right time to approach him?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. Again, it goes back to the individual, right? If a guy strikes out for the 3rd time in a row in a game, I know not to go walk over to him and, hey, man, let's talk about your last 3 at-bats. Now, on the flip side, right, there are guys that if they punch out 3 times in a row, they're going to come right to us. What do you see? What's going on? So you have that player who wants to know immediately, hey, am I missing pitches? Why am I missing pitches? Were those pitches strikes? Were they balls? Did I get screwed by an umpire? Whatever it may be. And then you have the player who's just is very even keel. So you have all these different, you can maybe bucket them at times. But I think when it comes down to the individual guy, you know how they operate. You know if and when they can take, not criticism, I should say, but when they can take information or help. And a lot of times, though, Matt, it's probably the next day, right? Give them their space in that moment. The TV camera might be on them. They're upset, they're frustrated. However they handle it is their business. But behind closed doors, if we have that open relationship, and I think all our players that are with us, they know at some point we can have that conversation. And it could be through a text at night after the game, like, hey, tough game, tough last, series. Tomorrow, let's come in early and let's talk about some things if you're willing to. Yes, no, okay, yeah, let's do it. And then you kind of give them, a 12-hour or a 24-hour gap of let it soak in, wash it off, be ready to go the next day. And then that's when they're going to be a lot more opportune to listening to information on what we have. But we have to do our preparation too as coaches, right? It's not just, hey, let's just talk about this. I got to have something prepared. So even post game, when I go home, if something happens in that light, I want to make sure that I have all my ducks in a row too, so that when a player does have a conversation with us, either we can look it up right away because we know where to go, or I already have it ready for him. And sometimes, they always say, like, there's a cliche term of, you as a teacher and you as a coach have to wait till the student is ready to arrive. If not, they're not gonna want anything. But if it keeps, snowballing over time, at some point, part of our job is to, hey, we got to talk about this, because we don't want this to keep spiraling out to where now we're 2.5, 3 weeks in, and man, we're just still waiting for that player. Like, hey, this is the big leagues now, right? Like, we need you folks to produce, and I'm sure you want to produce. So let's interject now before this just gets worse. And so that's usually the last case scenario. Very rarely, I really can't think of any times like that, because guys are really open to at least having sidebar conversations. But again, Matt, that's the trust that you build with these players. And when they're more willing to trust you, it's a lot easier for them, because they want to have success. They want to know why they're probably struggling for whatever reason that for whatever reason that they are going through.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of common sense on some level, right? So for players, I think most players know coaches ultimately are there because they want to help, right? They want to take whatever maybe not going well for the player, turn it around, and have things start going better. Like, that's generally what a coach wants. And I think players all know that the coach wants that. I think when things start to go downhill, though, for players is when the players working through some things that they believe they need to kind of focus on and work on, but the coach is saying, you're wasting your time, wrong stuff. This is why you're struggling. And it's more about like, it's this combative or you're like talking at each other. That's where the player ultimately is like, I don't want to listen to this guy. This doesn't work.
For sure. Yeah, you're 100% right. And I remember a few times when I first started in 2014, when I was a full-time head hitting coach at the low A level. And I was right there. It's like, hey, I see this and I want to give it to them, but they had their own agenda. They had their own thoughts on it. And I struggled at times, because I was like, but it's so obvious. Why can't we mesh this together? But until the player realizes that, hey, my way isn't the right way, I need to possibly learn with someone else. And we are in that position. We're there to serve them at the end of the day, right? There's no glory on our part, right? The player gets all the credit and they get the accolades, whatever it may be. And so be it. Like, they deserve it. We're in the background trying to help them get to their or achieve their goals and achieve their dreams of moving up from one level to the next and eventually making it to the major leagues. And I think I had to take a step back and say, okay, I'm not getting through to this player. So every now and then, my coaching strategy, and I learned this from a couple people that were my mentors, is a lot of times players want to come up with their own idea. Like, oh, I was thinking about this. So basically, we've got to start asking questions that kind of will lead them to possibly what we are trying to say, and stuff like, hey, I know what's wrong, let's fix it. Versus, hey, why do you think this is happening? Why do you think that's happening? What are you feeling? What are your thoughts? Have you tried this? Have you tried that? So it's almost like you're kind of dancing around it to eventually you're going to get to the point where they're like, oh yeah, the other day I thought about this, and I'm just thinking, we had just talked about this 3 days ago, but that's okay, because they have to at least come to their own realization that this is something that I want to do. This is what I feel is going to help me, even though we might have said it or thought about it 3-4 days prior. So it's just really navigating the right way to get them so that they do believe that, hey, this they kind of came about it on their own. Whereas maybe some of our questions and insight started to kind of soak in just a little bit more. And all of a sudden that seed began to take hold and take root. And now they're ready to make some changes.
Well, so the reason why I wanted to talk about this is I think if you draw a parallel between what you're going through with these players in the big leagues and what parents are going through with their kids in travel baseball, right? In a sense, mom and dad sometimes have this role as like hitting coach. Now, I'm not saying that the dad thinks he's a hitting coach or the mom thinks he's a hitting coach, but oftentimes when they're talking to their son about the game they just had, it's very easy for the son to get defensive, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so, Keoni, what advice would you give to a parent knowing what you're going through right now in the big leagues and the egos you're dealing with, the opinions that you have to deal with, and the things that you just described, which is like sometimes these players need to know it's their idea. What advice would you give to a mom or dad going through that and they're like helpless?
Right. Every family is a case-by-case scenario too, right? And to what degree is mom or dad having these post-game conversations in the car? And that was me growing up from the time I was in Little League through high school. But fortunately for me, I had a dad that knew baseball, number one, right? And I think so for the parents that are out there, if you haven't played baseball, or if you haven't been in your son's shoes, really kind of take a little bit more steps back, because how your son is dealing with the everyday being a normal young teenage high school player or a youth amateur player, they're going to struggle, right? Not every kid is going to go 4 for 4 every single day. And so I think hopefully the parents have a really good feel of who their son really is. Is he ready for criticism? Is he ready for what you have to say? Because at the end of the day, if you just keep attacking your sons or your players, and it's going to fall on deaf ears because they're not ready to listen. It compiles over time. And I've actually had conversations with some of my friends who are parents, and they've never played, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's like, hey, let's change it up. Maybe a day that your son struggles, talk about somebody else on the team. Like, hey, man, Michael had a really good game, or so-and-so pitched really well. So you kind of take the focus off that player and see if he opens up about talking about the game, talking about Michael, talking about that pitcher that threw really well. And then now all of a sudden, maybe it may open that door to where you can have a one-on-one conversation about mom, son, dad, son on that particular game. And guess what? If they don't talk about themselves, let it go. Let it go. And then maybe the next game something happens, because at some point the son's going to be, how come mom or dad hasn't asked me about me yet? Right. And now there might be some curiosity, like, and they might even want to come on and be, man, I was so mad that I missed this pitch. And all of a sudden that door is open. And now the wavelengths and the information between parent and son starts to flow a little bit better. And it's not going to I don't think there won't be as much clogs or a stopping point in between.
Yeah. What I've found a lot of families benefit from is take a step back and be open-minded and ask questions rather than tell the player, why did you do this? You need to do this. Because that's when the player shuts down and gets super defensive. But instead, hey, walk me through your thought process in this at-bat. And by the way, not right after the game. As you said, maybe wait 24 hours, give it a day. Maybe wait for the player to bring it up to you. But hey, get inquisitive. Walk me through this at-bat. What were you thinking? What were you looking for? What's the takeaway? Right? And these are general questions. You can certainly get more specific. But I think when you have this approach, definitely 24 hours later, because 24 hours also allows the kid to calm down and the mom or dad to calm down.
Correct. Yeah, it's easy to talk about the game when you did well, right? And it's really finding that balance as a parent to, okay, I know my son struggled. Maybe I don't even say anything. Maybe we talk about school. Maybe we talk about a sibling or whatever it may be, and don't even let them feel that, I have to, at some point, mom or dad's going to talk to me about the game that I just went 0 for 4 with a couple strikeouts and I might have made an error or whatever it may be. And I just think that let them be, let the player process his own possible either mistakes, but turn it more into his own learning point of, I didn't have the success that I wanted today. Well, why? And then maybe he can come to his own conclusion. And like you said, later on, circle back, and now they might be able to talk about it. And if not, let that be in the rear view mirror and never bring it up again, because in 2 or 3 days, he's got to play again. And it's almost like you starting fresh. And I think that would be advice, especially, and I'm saying this as a non-parent, but I know in that seat as the player, like my mom was a sounding board. Games that I went home after with my mom, I don't ever really remember her talking to me about the game, to be honest. It was my dad who, he had the questions, he had the insight, he knew what he wanted to say, but at times it's like, I'm going to shut out, I'm going to sit in the back of the van, and I'm just going to tune out. And even though I knew and believed that he had my best interest at heart, 100%, but I don't want to hear that right now. I'm mad at myself for not getting the results or struggling at, on the ball field, and let me deal with it. But I'll be ready to go because I want back at it. Right. That was where it's like, man, I can't wait in 2 days to play that next game or that next team because I have something to prove. But that was just my mindset.
All right, Keoni, so let's go back to the big leagues. I want to pivot back there because I think This is a really interesting conversation. All right, talk to me a little bit about like the various drills. Like if you're going to go into the cage with a player, and I understand that it's going to depend on who the player is and what drills he likes to do. But is there a trend that you've seen with specific drills that you believe kind of works the best? And like, what's the progression as you build to, let's just say, live BP?
Drill work, Matt, I really think for me, at least what I've seen in the last 3 years at the major level versus in the minor leagues. Minor leagues, I feel that we have a little bit more leeway to implement drill work because a lot of those players are raw. They don't know their swing well. They're doing things that possibly shouldn't be doing. So I think help navigating to say, hey, if what we're working on physically, these two drills you don't need, we are going to implement these two drills to help you, whether it's holding your backside or understanding what your bat path may be so that we are staying in the zone longer, whatever. But I think at the major league level, what I know at the major league level is these players, because they've groomed themselves throughout the minor leagues, they know what their routine is. So what drill package works for them is what I think builds their confidence. And when they feel that they're executing this drill work, that's what makes them going to have greatness at some point when they step on that field. I can't say that this drill or that drill should be an everyday thing because, again, it varies on the player and what he may be working on. But what I do say is there are some drills that I feel can help just as more of like touching points, not spend a whole lot of time on. But I don't want it to feel like it's just a check the box.
Sure. Well, maybe we do this. Talk about how does a player come up with that, as you described it, kind of that drill package.
Yeah.
What drills work for me, what drills don't. And maybe just take us through an example of a progression as far as like, the reason I'm asking this question, just so you know, is there's a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old who is like totally confused, lost, doesn't know where to start.
Right.
And I want to give them more of a foundation for the way to think about it.
Yeah. Okay.
Instead of getting overwhelmed with, okay, I need to check the box. If I do these 50 things, then I'm good. That's not what I'm trying to provide.
Yeah. So I think a normal progression, and there's a couple players that we have, they start off with tee work, right? They start off with tee. They place the ball in different parts of the strike zone and different heights. And for them, it's, I want to feel my bat path. I want to feel my body as it rotates and as it turns. I want to feel my hands, whatever. Everyone has different cues that they want when they're executing the tee work. And then the next progression from there would probably just be more like a front toss, right? Whether it's short overhand or underhand flips, that's the next progression because now the ball is moving. And so with those players, it's I just did my tee work. I feel where my path and what my body needs. All right, move the ball around. And if I can execute a few pitches, top of the zone, bottom of the zone, inside, outside, all right, move on to the next one. And that may be into something where I just start backing up and almost throwing regular batting practice, right? And then the ball's coming in a little bit more. Of course, it is random, right? I'm not throwing every pitch on the inside corner. I'm not throwing every pitch on the away corner. It's what are they trying to do in that space in those 10, 15 swings? How does their body move? Are they seeing the ball well? And then at some point, eventually, it'll probably ramp up to a machine, right? So for me, that's the progression that some of these guys take. And I think that allows them to, number one, at least get game ready to see something visually coming at them hard because we don't have people throwing 60 feet, 6 inches, batting practice with high velocity and spin and mixing pitches. So that to me is a normal progression for a lot of the guys that we have in general. Some guys, they might not do front toss that day. They might go from T straight into BP, right? They feel good. Hey, let's go. There's some guys that might just want to spend a little bit more time on T. So there's some variance. But that normal progression from T to underhand front toss, maybe regular batting practice, mix BP. We do a lot of mixed BP too, where guys want to be challenged. Throw me breaking balls, throw me fastballs. Don't tell me what's coming. And then eventually, if we can get them on that machine to see the high velocity fastball, to see the shape of a breaking ball, now they're revving that engine up so that when game time starts at 6:30, 7 o'clock, they're ready to go.
Keoni, is there something that you would want to tell a mom or dad or a player who's 15 years old who tells you that they have the dream of being a Major League Baseball player? What's kind of, if you only had one thing that you could tell them, what would you say?
I don't think I would tell them one thing. I would ask. I would turn it into a question, be like, what is your process? What is your plan? Because if you have this goal, right? I've read this before. If you have, if you have a dream, but no process and no plan for it, it ends up just being a dream. So instead of like, okay, I know this player wants to be at 15 years old, wants to be a major league player. Instead of just saying, okay, I'm going to just give you one thing, I would flip it around and be, hey, what is your process? Or what do you feel are the plans that you have? What are your plans to get to that dream? You're here at 15. Now you're trying to be up here at 21, 25 years old. Well, there's a lot of steps that you need to get there. It's not just I want it and then you jump to it. So I would flip it around and say, okay, what is your plan? How do you think you need to go about between now to hopefully get to the big leagues, your idea of what it takes? And I think from there, Matt, you just kind of break off into these different layers and you can go down all these different avenues because they might not know. They have this dream, they have this goal, but they don't know where to start. And when they say, hey, I don't know, okay, now it opens up that can of this is probably what you need to do first. This is probably what you need to do second. Are you taking care of your body? Are you training? Are you getting enough sleep? How are you working? Who are the people that are helping you? Right? Because it takes a village, really, man, if you think about it, of help to so that these kids can fulfill the dream of eventually making it to the major leagues. That obviously it's hard, but I think there's not one thing I feel that I can just give a player instead of just what is your process? And from there, maybe we can start doing a deeper dive and giving him that direction to say, hey, here's 5 or 6 things that I think you need to start with. Go there. And when you start accomplishing that, then you can start adding another layer, because as they get older, they're maturing too. And they're seeing and they're realizing, hey, this isn't for me. Maybe I just pivot and stop, or man, I love it. I am getting better. I see progress. Coach Keoni, whatever. What's the next thing? What can I add to what I've already built my foundation off of?
Would you give somebody some advice as far as their process goes if they said to you, well, Keoni, I don't really have a process. There's 50 things that my dad has told me that I need to do, and I'm doing all those 50 things, and I don't what else should I be doing?
Right.
What comes to mind?
If there's a player that has that or son that has that, well, then we got to filter it down, right? Because if all 50 things aren't working, well, lay it out for me. What are you doing? Tell me, and if I have to sit down and say, okay, this is your process, or this is what you feel your process is, and you're doing all these 50 different things, hopefully with my experience, and if not people that I could lean on for help, and if I don't have the answer, I'm going to pick up a phone and ask someone who could possibly give me a better advice to help with this particular player. And that's what, for me, there's no ego involved. I don't have all the answers. I have knowledge because a lot of people have poured into me. And so if I can pour something into that kid, it's like, hey, your process or what your dad is probably helping you with, we need to change. And so from there, let's start with, what do you feel you are good at? Why do you feel, or why do you think that you could become a major league player? What are your strengths? And see what the kid has to say. And then from there, I feel like, okay, your strength is this and your strength in that. All right, well, what are your weaknesses? Because we need to kind of tap into that as well. So to me, it becomes a holistic view of how we can try to help navigate this player to get himself maybe on track or move in a better direction.
Keoni, have you found when a player gets called up to the big leagues for the first time, have you found that a lot of times most players have the same weakness when they first get to the big leagues? Meaning, is there something that is kind of this common denominator of oh, you haven't been to the big leagues yet, so you're going to have to go through this?
I think more along the lines, Matt, what I've seen is the adjustment of pitching that comes at them every single day for every single game that they play. And that's where, being a hitting coordinator a few years ago, seeing the AAA level, you might have that one really good starter who's on the brink of possibly cracking into the major leagues, but the other starters on that AAA team or the other relievers, there's nothing really that stands out. Some of them are good for that level. And until when I, was at the major league level, and it's like, man, even the not so good bullpen arms are really good. And so I think for that major league player who steps into the box for the first time, it's what am I seeing coming at me every single day and every single pitch? Because to me, that's another, that's a gap between AAA and Major League is the pitching that these guys are seeing. Not necessarily the velocity, but I think the stuff is a little bit better. Obviously, if not, those guys probably wouldn't be in the big leagues. And then you take into account the command, right? How well are these guys locating their fastball? How well are these guys using their spin? How efficiently are they using it? And that takes at bats. That takes time for our young players that when they break in, it's you are who you are. You're here because physically you have the attributes, your swing and your body of work is in a good place. Now the next layer, the next adjustment is, can you see and literally hit what's coming at you every single time? And I think that's, to me, is a big adjustment for these players, not just maybe one thing physically, it's just more of what are they seeing and how can they adjust from pitcher to pitcher.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, I want to talk about where you're from, right? So you're from Hawaii, and I think a lot of times for any of the listeners who've never been to Hawaii, it's obviously a beautiful place. I think people hear Hawaii and they think, oh, how fortunate you are. And I would agree. Like growing up in Hawaii sounds like it would be a dream. But I want to kind of go into a little bit of the challenges that exist, especially in youth and travel baseball, for a lot of these kids and these families who live in Hawaii, right? Because oftentimes these tournaments aren't in Hawaii, they're in the mainland, right? A lot of the scouts that, are scouting all the best players and all the colleges and things of that nature, those people and those individuals are in the mainland, not necessarily Hawaii, right? How did you handle in high school navigating that without really, you had some guidance and some advice, but like talk to us a little bit about the challenges that existed for you that maybe doesn't come natural to a lot of people thinking about Hawaii being, a challenge.
Right. So taking me back to my high school days, there weren't very many showcase tournaments. The only two that I could think of that was available was Team One National Showcase, which I think then pivoted and filtered, or not filtered, but I think changed to like Baseball Factory, and then Baseball Factory started to get off the ground. But Team One National Showcase was held in June in Cincinnati, Ohio, which I was fortunate enough to be invited to between my junior and senior year. And then I also was invited to play in the area code games, which was at the back end of the summer, possibly I believe in August. Now there's all kinds of, you got Perfect Game, you got 5-tool, you have prep baseball. You've got any tournament that you want that's available now versus 25 years, 30 years ago, believe it or not. And so it came down to just basically performance, right? And I was fortunate that when I went to my first showcase in Cincinnati, there was a guy by one of my close friends. His name is Dane Sardina, who was a catcher, who everybody knew because of how good he was as a catcher. And it helped that Dane was there with me, and we were one of three. There's another guy by the name of Scooter Martinez that went. So there's three of us from Hawaii that went to this showcase tournament, and we performed well. And so from there, I was able to get invited to the 18 and under Team USA junior national team invite because it was an Olympic year, and had to go to Joplin, Missouri, of all places. And Dane and I both went. And again, you're playing against guys that had just been drafted and graduated, and guys that were seniors to be. And from there, that's where I was still being able to be seen by professional scouts and college coaches. And once I made that team, I was fortunate enough to go to Cuba as an 18 or 17-year-old kid back then and compete at a World Junior Championships. So needless to say, I never got to go to the area code because that coincided and overlapped at the same time. Had I not made the USA team, I would have been at least participating and partaking in the area code showcase. So that was kind of my way. And luckily I had performed well. And of course, Dane performed well. There was another guy by the name of Justin Wayne, who was a pitcher my year out of high school, that he was getting some steam as a right-handed starting pitcher. And so when scouts came back in the day, number one, I thank those two guys for being really good because scouts wanted to see them, but I was able to benefit from it because I got a chance to play against those guys. And when you're playing against those guys, now you have, whether it's assistant general managers, maybe general managers, but cross-checkers for sure, they're coming in and now they get to see us play live and just go from there. The video camera really wasn't a big thing, let alone there's definitely no phones back in the day to take videos. So fast forward to now, here we are, 2024, 2025, and everyone's got access to video, right? I mean, I could take my phone right now and video some kid who's just taking batting practice, and I could send it to a scout. So the opportunities for kids now, especially being in Hawaii, yeah, it's tougher because we're always it's a logistical thing, right? We have to get off the island to go play in these national showcases. But luckily, there are some entities that have come to Hawaii. I know they've come in the fall, and they're bringing professional scouts. They're bringing college coaches down to see and get more looks on some of these players. So exposure right now, I think, is at an all-time high, however way you look at it. But still, for people from Hawaii, we have to go to the mainland to get opportunities to be seen possibly by more people at a central location.
How big of a challenge is just the simple fact that, yeah, you guys are landlocked, right? And maybe a kid who's 14, 15 has never left the island, but he has ambitions and dreams of playing professional baseball. Like, what do you tell that kid? Because I will tell you, and there is this stigma sometimes around Hawaiian kids in pro ball where it's like, oh, has he actually is he okay being away from home? Because right. A lot of times these guys, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head, there was a kid who signed with a major league organization and goes to spring training, gets back on the plane and goes right back to Hawaii and like retires.
Yeah, I'm sure it has happened, and it may still continue to this day at some point, right? Till as long as the draft happens. And so the kids, it's a culture shock. Number one, Maddie, right? They're in a small place, and especially talk about kids coming from the outer islands, who they're not around a big population of people. And so any kid that leaves the island, there's going to be some nerves. You're going to be scared because there's a lot of unknowns, especially if you've hardly ever traveled to the mainland. But I think now that there are some teams that have traveled to California, Texas, Arizona, maybe even Florida. So at least these kids are kind of getting a taste of like, hey, if I want to succeed in this game, my mindset is I'm not going to be doing it in Hawaii. I'm going to be doing it on the mainland. And so the thought process is, all right, this is just a small stepping stone, but yet it's different when you have to go live at some town in the minor leagues, or you get drafted, or you go to even just to get off the island to go play in college baseball. It's a different way of life that a lot of these kids don't realize what they're in for until they're actually doing it. So of course, homesickness comes into play. And so I think if there is a piece of advice that I could give parents to that player is like, hey, you got to get your son off this island somehow, some way, and expose them to what life on the mainland is like, even if it's a family vacation. Now, of course, it costs money. So some people have the means, some people don't. But those players, I think it comes down to the scouts really doing their homework that, hey, I'm going to always have that stigma in the back of my mind. Like, can these kids handle being away from home? And there are a lot of guys that did, who have had success, and they thrive, and they've done it. But I think that there are some kids that may fall through the cracks because they're just not mentally prepared for them. And that's not really their fault. I think it's just a product of where they're growing up. And so for them to step in that realm and take that leap of faith of, I can do this. Oh, by the way, and pro baseball is hard. Oh, college baseball is no joke either. It may start, the negative thoughts may start to creep in. And now it's like, hey, this isn't for me. I need to go back home.
Well, and that's why I think it's so good that guys like you obviously are still attached to the game. You have the Kurt Suzuki's of the world, the Shane Victorinos of the world, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, Kaneko Teixeira. Like, there's so many of you guys who are still connected to the game, even past your playing careers, that I think a lot of these kids can learn from. And more than anything, they can look to you and say, hey, you did it. What's it like? What are some things that I need to be aware of? How do I better prepare? I think you brought up good advice. Like, if a family has the means, if it's possible, it does make sense to try to get to the mainland just to kind of get them more ingratiated with the community, the just what it's like on the mainland, just so they're not as overwhelmed. If in fact that family and that kid does believe that they can play professional baseball. So is there anything, I'm assuming, Keoni, like when because I know Hawaii, even though it's a big place, is also kind of a small place, especially in the baseball community. Do you stay connected with a lot of these Hawaiian guys who are still connected to the game? When you guys see each other and.
I do my best. I do my best with that. And, I feel like the guys that have at least played professionally, there's only maybe a handful of guys that I haven't met yet. And to me, it's because they're from different islands. So I've never had an opportunity to cross paths with them, but I do know who they are. I do know their names. And for me, it's a bond, right? To me, it's like a little fraternity and a brotherhood because again, there's not many guys that always get an opportunity to play and sign a professional contract. And so I think there's a lot of commonality. How am I'm missing
Commonality.
commonality. Thank you very much. That we have because we share the same environment and culture that we grew up in. And there's that just respect factor, man. Like we love up on one another, and we know the importance of setting good boundaries and setting good guidelines for the young kids that are coming up who aspire to possibly do what we've gotten a chance to do. And that's our responsibility. Like that's our responsibility as veterans, as baseball or former baseball people, to give back however it may be. And it might just be talking to one kid. It could be talking to multiple kids, multiple youth teams, high school teams, whatever that may be. And I think those sidebar conversations can have a lot of impact. And because of our experience being away, but let alone because we all understand where these kids are coming from, literally, and that the more information that we can help guide them with, the better they're going to be prepared if they want to take that next step and leaving the islands.
All right. So if you had to say one thing, I like these questions where I box you in to where you can't say like two. Well, there's really two things. Okay, I want the one thing. Okay. So you are at the airport flying back to spring training, and this dad sees you and he recognizes you and he says, Keoni, hey, I want to introduce you to my son. And he introduces you to a 15-year-old kid. And the 15-year-old kid says, Keoni, we're flying over to the mainland for the first time. I'm going to go watch spring training. I really have a dream of being a Major League Baseball player. Okay. Now, this isn't what's your process, what's your plan question, right? Mm-hmm. But this is, what should I pay attention to when I go to this game or when I watch it on TV?
Yeah.
What should I look for?
I would say if they are going to spring training, a couple of days, they're going to probably see several teams. That's awesome because now they get to check out how different teams play, or let alone, maybe target a special player or a certain player that they want to watch. My advice to them would be, if you can go to a backfield at 10 o'clock in the morning when the Major League Club and all the players that are there and they are practicing and getting ready for their day and preparing basically for the season, watch how they go about their business, because that's an everyday thing. The game is the game, right? They're going to go, they're going to compete, they're going to get their 2-3 at-bats, they're going to get their 1 or 2 innings pitched. But watch just how an everyday baseball operation takes place at spring training. Because if you can enjoy watching them work on their craft, enjoying the environment of spring training as well, then you're going to be that much more prepared to say, hey, when the game time comes, the lights go on, the adrenaline should flow, I'm ready to go compete. But it's what they're doing behind the scenes that is preparing them for that specific game, because that doesn't change, right? Every day you're practicing, you're sharpening your skill set, you're sharpening your iron, and you're getting ready for battle. But it's an everyday thing. Players, I think they need to realize that, like, hey, we don't take days off when it comes to once the season, especially spring training, starts. And then there's the weight room part, there's the conditioning part. Then what are they doing? How are they eating? Are they refueling their body to be able to go perform as best as they can? So take it all in would be my advice, instead of just watching a game and maybe watching one player. See how everybody and how it all works.
Yeah, like how many times, and I love your answer, how many times have we, as people around the game but not players anymore, tell people who are going to be professionals, hey, look, it's about to be your career, right? This is going to be your career. And everybody hears it and everybody knows, oh, I know, I get it. But when you first step foot on a baseball field, once you become a professional and you start to get paid for it, it kind of sets in, right? Up to that point, it's, do you want to play today? Do you want to show up? Right? No one's making you show up. Now you're getting paid for it. You're expected to be there. There's no excuses. And you also don't get pat on the back for showing up. Hey, I did a good job today. I showed up for practice. What? No, it's what's expected. And so I love that your answer was that, because so many of these kids, I feel like, go to spring training, go to these major league games, and they just can't wait for the game to start. Right. And like you said, they're like performers. So it's like, ooh, I get to watch the guy performing right now. But instead, go behind the scenes. And like, how did this guy get to a place where he now gets to be this guy who's a performer?
Absolutely. And there's, throughout the course of a spring training day, and that's why we have so much variability and leeway, because if a guy doesn't play that day, but he wants to work on breaking balls because he's struggling right now with his timing, whatever it may be, during the game, we can go take him into the cage. We have that flexibility. Hey, he needs to work on breaking ball things, or he needs to work on fastball, whatever it may be. We have that opportunity to still do these touch points throughout the course of the day. Especially if that guy, like I said, if that guy's not playing or is not in the lineup that day, there's extra work that they can do. And a lot of guys take advantage of that, because once the season starts, they don't have that opportunity. Like, hey, they got to go, right? Like you said, this is their job. But it's part of also being a professional, Matt, as you would know. Like, hey, when I'm in this game and I got this opportunity that I'm so blessed with, now I've worked for. My process is, how do I show up being a professional every single day? Whether I'm tired, I'm not feeling good, I didn't sleep, whatever it may be, you still got to find a way to grind it out, right? Because you're not going to always have good days. You're not going to, hopefully you have more good days than bad days, but it's through the tough days where it's like, I got to go out there and I got to still compete. And these guys, that find their way to the major leagues and they have success, they find ways to show up every single day ready to go, no matter what. And excuses, right? To me, a lot of excuses get thrown out the door. And I love the quote of, excuses will always be there, but opportunity won't. And so if minor league players can think about that along their journey, oh man, it's too hot today, or, oh, it was raining, oh, it's a rain delay. We have to stop the game, because of a rain delay, and then we got to go back out and perform. Like, you've got to find ways to still stay mentally in it, because it's still part of your job. You still got to perform, right? It's not like, I don't want to show up today. I'm gonna call in sick or have a PTO, right? It's like, hey, you're in this grind, and that's why it's so tough, and that's why a lot of guys who are very talented maybe never thrive to become that everyday major league player, or maybe they get to the major leagues, but it's tough for them to stick, because that part of it is just, it's too much. And like I said, it's not for everyone. Coaching is not for everyone either.
Right. That's great, man. I love that. I'm gonna coin that phrase. That's Keoni DeRenne's line.
I don't know who said it. I know it wasn't me, but I took
excuses
will always be there.
Excuses are always going to be there, but opportunity won't. Yeah. Says Keoni DeRenne.
I tell you what, when I was with Pittsburgh, we had an acronym, and it was NOW, N-O-W, no opportunity wasted. And that I use a lot when I go and I talk to young kids, because, hey, if you're the 12th guy on a 12-man team, don't waste the opportunity when coach gives you a chance to pinch hit or pinch run. Like, take that as, man, I'm going to make the most of that situation.
Right.
Because sometimes that's how guys get integrated into a starting rotation or a starting opportunity or starting lineup. And now you can't have all 15 guys, 20 guys playing at one time. So the guys that are waiting for that opportunity, be ready for it. And that might give you another opportunity, because the coach feels that you're reliable and you're dependable. That's your best, your best asset is, how dependable is this guy every single day? I know what this guy is going to bring to the table. Even if he's not starting, I know that I can count on him if his time and his number is called.
Brother, way to drop the mic.
I don't know if that's a mic drop moment, but
that's a mic drop moment. It is.
I appreciate it.
No, Keoni, you're a blessing, brother. I've been telling you that for a long time, man. I can't believe you've known each other for 25, 26 years, but I'll take it.
25 more, Matty.
No doubt. And I cannot wait for the day where we're going to celebrate you and you're going to win a World Series title. And
well, don't celebrate me for that. I want to celebrate with family and loved ones and team and organization. Obviously, it's not. I wouldn't have accomplished anything. I'm just a small part of all this, and that's where we can all embrace it all together for sure.
You are awfully humble, but I get to brag. You are better than that. Any organization that has you, man, now it's the Kansas City Royals. They are blessed to have you. No, you're truly a special guy, man. And it's no surprise that you guys have had success at the big league level. Both you and Zoom do a phenomenal job. So it's exciting getting to watch it, and I cannot wait to see what you guys are going to do this year.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. And I'm very grateful that the organization has believed in me and trusted me and our staff and everybody else in the organization to basically help these players and steward them and guide them so that they can perform night in, night out, and play for the city and play for the fans of Kansas City. It was special, man. 2024 was a special year for us, and I could not be happier for the organization as a whole.
Just getting started, brother.
Just getting started, for sure.
Well, Keoni, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Maddie. Thanks for having me.